Chapter 296, Establishing Clout. Bunjiro looked at Yojeo and Fumito, who were just sitting in the training ground. He asked with a frown on his face, "Shouldn't we discuss more strategies and work on our teamwork?" Yojeo and Fumito just talked about their abilities and asked Bunjiro to do the same. After knowing everyone's abilities, Fumito formed a very basic plan and Yojeo agreed without any arguments. Bunjiro wondered, "What the hell? This is even worse than when we were put in a genin squad. Aren't they supposed to be experienced Umbu ninjas?" Fumito shook his head and replied, "We won't be able to improve our teamwork much in 30 minutes. So it's pointless. Just ensure that we don't get in each other's way while fighting and we will be good. After all, our opponent is someone who has just been promoted to Umbu captain." Bunjiro wasn't convinced. He said, "But..." Yojeo cut him off and said, "He is right. Captain could have given us more time to prepare to form better teamwork. But we aren't genins. As an Umbu, we may spontaneously be asked to team up with other Umbu ninjas, or other Umbu teams, or even operate solo. So we have to be prepared to form good coordination with any other ninja. Consider this as a part of your training." Bunjiro thought for a bit and replied, "All right." He sat down as well and joined his new teammates. Yojeo's mind wandered as she recalled the meeting she had the previous day. One day ago, Yojeo appeared in the Hokage's office. Only Hiruzen and Shikaku were present in the room. She respectfully asked, "Lord Hokage, what are your orders?" Hiruzen waited for a few seconds and said, "Yojeo, your Umbu team will be changed. I'm placing you in a different Umbu unit." Yojeo was surprised. Her eyes lit up. She asked, "Am I getting promoted to Umbu captain, Lord Hokage?" Hiruzen smiled and said, "No, not yet. We have observed your improvements and you have been performing very well. But it's not yet the time for your promotion." Yojeo became silent. She was confused. She thought, "Captain Yamato said that I'm ready for the promotion mission. Why did Lord Hokage say the opposite? And why am I being shifted?" Hiruzen continued, "This change will be beneficial for you. Your new captain will be Suzuki Fujin. I believe you will learn a lot from him." Shikaku handed her a file that contained some basic information regarding Fujin but didn't mention anything about his abilities or mission record. Yojeo glanced through the information. A look of surprise appeared behind her mask as Yojeo noticed Fujin's age. Hiruzen explained, "He is quite strong, but is very young. And he tends to go a bit extreme during the missions. While working with him, you will also be responsible to stop him if you feel that he is doing something that will have very adverse implications." Though Hiruzen was impressed by what Fujin did in his promotion mission, neither he nor Shikaku wanted to see him do anything of that scale once again. His actions had almost broken the delicate balance of the ninja world. Hiruzen wanted the current peace to extend for as long as it could. Yojeo was surprised by his words. She asked, "By stopping, do you mean?" She didn't complete her question. Hiruzen replied, "No, just talk with him. He is very reasonable. He is still your captain. So you aren't allowed to fight or backstab him." Yojeo sighed in relief. She didn't want to attack her comrade. She nodded and said, "All right. I'll do my best." Hiruzen smiled again and said, "If you keep up your good work, I'll allow you to take the promotion mission after a year." Yojeo replied with determination in her voice, "Thank you. I won't disappoint you." She left the office. Shikaku watched her leave with a serious face. Hiruzen hadn't informed him of his plans. He analyzed, that's strange. She is strong and experienced enough to be promoted. Yet, she wasn't. He recalled the names of the Umbu that would be assigned to Fujin and began analyzing all information. Suddenly, it clicked. He looked at Hiruzen with surprise as he realized, I see. Yojeo is confirmed to be an Umbu captain. So is Fumito. As for Bunjiro, Hiruzen said that Fujin had guided him in the academy. With his talent, he should reach the Jounin level as well. He asked, you are planning to increase Fujin's clout? Hiruzen wasn't surprised that Shikaku figured it out. It was the main reason why he had called him there. He nodded and replied, yes. Though his strength is impressive, his reputation is almost non-existent. He might be more famous in Kumo than in our village. His relationships aren't much either. The only one with significant influence that is close to him is Renjiro. Even in the younger generation, the only ones close to him are Hyagahoka and Senju. Though they are talented, they won't be anywhere near enough to support him in the future. Compared with Kakashi, he is highly lacking in both aspects. Shikaku nodded. By giving Fujin 3 talented subordinates, Hiruzen had set up an easy path for him to gain influence. Yojeo and Fumito will remember that Fujin was their captain for some time. As for Bunjiro, he was guided by Fujin from the time he was in the academy. So he would become another one to support him. And since Yojeo and Fumito would be promoted very soon, Fujin would be given newer subordinates to increase his influence in the Umbu. Shikaku asked, are you confident that he can become a Hokage? Hiruzen shrugged and said, it's tough to say. But there isn't any harm in helping him. If he lives up to our expectations, then he could compete with Kakashi for my seat in the future. And since neither of them is hungry for political power, it shouldn't create any internal conflict in the village. Shikaku nodded and said, I agree. But, increasing his reputation will be a bit problematic. Both the Kumo incident and this mission can't be revealed to the public. We will have to create more opportunities in the future like we did for Kakashi. Hiruzen replied, it's fine. He is only 14. Let him stay in the dark and keep accumulating his strength. When the time is right, we can create multiple opportunities for him to gain fame. Even the Umbu commander post can be handed over to him if need be. Shikaku nodded. Raising someone's reputation wasn't very difficult for them. Especially if that someone was worthy of that reputation. He discussed the Tsunagakure matter with Hiruzen and left the office. Alone in his office, Hiruzen looked at a scroll lying on his desk. There were many scrolls on his desk at all times, so Shikaku didn't pay any attention to that scroll. Hiruzen thought, I was initially planning to give Fujin a couple more months off. Learning advanced Fuinjutsu is difficult and very time-consuming. But with shadow clones, he should be able to do the symbols and the easier seals in 3 months. But, recalling the contents of the scroll, Hiruzen shivered involuntarily. He thought, I thought I had hinted it to him quite clearly. But, why did he increase his consumption of wind crystals? Did he get the wrong message somehow? Don't tell me he thought that my buying more wind crystals from other countries was a message to keep using as many as he wants. Sigh, this kid is too good at giving me headaches. If I let him be free for another couple of months, Konoha might actually begin running out of wind crystals. And that would invite scrutiny from the council. Though I might be able to handle it, it will bring a lot of unnecessary attention to Fujin and his access to them in the future will be limited heavily. So I can only send him on missions and limit the amount of time he has to spend in the training facilities. Present. Fujin waited for 30 minutes and appeared at the training ground. Yojeo, Fumito, and Bunjiro got up and got ready. Fujin looked at them and said, "In order to cooperate properly, we need to know where everyone's strengths lie and what everyone's weaknesses are. There won't be any killing or maiming in this fight. But give it your all. You won't stand a chance against me if you hold back." Though Fumito was a bit skeptical, he planned to give it his all. Yojeo and Bunjiro also became serious. He picked up a stone and tossed it in the air and said, "The fight begins once the stone hits the ground." Yojeo grabbed her sword, Fumito grabbed a few shurikens and Bunjiro held 3 shurikens in each hand. As soon as the stone hit the ground, Yojeo rushed forward with her sword while Bunjiro launched all 6 shurikens at Fujin. Meanwhile, Fumito stayed back and weaved hand signs to take advantage of any openings Fujin provided. The 6 shurikens ripped through the air and hit Fujin's body. Bunjiro's eyes widened. He thought, so easy. However, he saw the shurikens passing through his body and Fujin's image dispersed a bit before dissipating completely. He asked, when did he create a clone? Fumito's expression was serious. He said, that wasn't a clone. It was an after-image. Fumito didn't see Fujin move at all. He closed his eyes and activated his chakra field. All his previous disdain was tossed out of his mind. Yojeo was serious as well. She only saw the general direction of where Fujin had gone. She turned her head to her right and shouted, "Incoming." Chapter 297, Displaying His Might. On their right, a gigantic dragon made of wind was flying towards them. Yojeo immediately jumped forward and out of its way. Fumito sensed the attack as well. Only Bunjiro was caught off guard. Fumito grabbed his arm and jumped in the opposite direction. Hiding among the trees, Fujin observed their movements and thought, not bad. I was expecting Fumito to dodge by himself. The dragon suddenly turned towards Fumito and Bunjiro and chased after them. Fumito let Bunjiro's arm go and said, "Use a water jutsu to stop it." He began weaving hand signs himself while moving backwards. Bunjiro also did the same. Just when the wind dragon was about to crash into them, Bunjiro released his jutsu. Water release, water wall jutsu. A wall of water appeared in front of the dragon. Fumito immediately launched his jutsu as well. Lightning release, lightning net jutsu. Lightning began flowing through the water wall and a blue net could be seen sparkling inside it. Bunjiro's eyes widened in shock. He created a perfect combination attack on the first try. At the same time, Yojeo traced the wind dragon's path and tracked Fujin's location. She tried approaching him sneakily but Fujin spotted her immediately. Since stealth was of no use, Yojeo approached him openly and jumped in the air. She swung her swords in a circular motion, leaving a trace of after-images behind. Hazy Moon Night. Yojeo moved at a remarkable speed, forming a blur as she closed the distance between her and Fujin in the blink of an eye. In one swift motion, she unleashed a slashing strike aimed directly at Fujin's neck. Though her sword movements were irregular and her speed very high, Fujin had no issues in seeing her actions clearly. A sword appeared in his hand. He raised it just in time, meeting Yojeo's blade with a resounding clash. Yojeo had expected Fujin to stop her attack. She intended to use the impact to halt her momentum and swiftly transition into her next series of attacks. Yet, to her surprise, she found herself unable to feel the expected resistance from Fujin's forceful strike. Instead of blocking, Fujin parried her blow and sent it veering to his right. The sword harmlessly passed by him. Yojeo, carried by the momentum of her own strike, continued her movement and found herself dangerously close to Fujin's flank. In one fluid and precise motion, Fujin continued the natural flow of his sword and slashed her thigh, cutting the straps of the weapon pouch attached to her right leg. Yujao stopped a few meters behind him. Her right leg had a shallow sword cut causing it to bleed. She turned around to look at Fujin. Shock could be seen in her eyes as she thought, he parried my attack. But how? Even Hayate-senpai never managed to do this. He could only dodge or block my attack. A bit away, Fumito and Bunjiro were able to stop the Wind Dragon with their combination jutsu. However, before they could relax, they heard, "That's impressive." Both immediately jumped forward and turned around and saw Fujin standing with two balls of wind in his palms. Fujin's shadow clone fired two wind explosion spheres at Fumito and Bunjiro. Neither had sufficient time to use a jutsu, so both of them jumped out of the way. Though they dodged, the spheres exploded and sent sharp winds flying in all directions. Both received several minor cuts on their chest, abdomen, and arms. Both had frowns on their faces. Fumito realized, he can hide his chakra perfectly. I didn't sense him at all. If this was a mission, we would have died. Bunjiro was dumbfounded. He thought, I got injured by a rank D jutsu? I thought that I had reduced the difference between us. But now, how much is he holding back to fight with just C and D rank jutsus? Despite their emotions, both attacked immediately. Fumito shouted, "Distract him. I'll get him with mind-body switch jutsu." He extended his arms towards Fujin's clone and waited for an opportunity. Bunjiro ran towards Fujin's clone while weaving hand signs quickly. Water release, water shuriken jutsu. Dozens of water shurikens appeared in front of Bunjiro and flew at Fujin's clone. He dodged them while thinking, since when did Umbu start having ninjas that shout out their tactics? Besides, even though that jutsu is overpowered, it is useless without the aid of a Nara or excessive support. He dodged a few dozen water shurikens, but more kept appearing around Bunjiro and launched at him continuously. The clone's eyes began glowing and landed on Bunjiro. Bunjiro was continuously releasing his chakra. The chakra in his body was moving in the same way it did after he weaved the hand signs. Fujin's clone analyzed, I see. Though he needed hand signs for the first time, he has learned to control his chakra well enough to keep spamming that jutsu without the need for repeating or maintaining any hand seals. My previous analysis of just an average Chunin was wrong. He should be able to perform this jutsu without any hand seals very soon. Fumito observed Fujin's clone moving around at high speeds. He had no chance to use his jutsu. However, he didn't mind and waited for an opportunity. A bit away, Fujin and Yujao were clashing with their swords. Neither used any jutsu. Yujao was breathing heavily. In just a few minutes of clashing, there were dozens of cuts on her body. On the contrary, there wasn't a single cut on Fujin's body. Behind her mask, Yujao had a bitter smile. She muttered to herself, I understand what Lord Hokage meant. I have used every style, every dance that I know, but he countered all my attacks without using any sword style. No wonder he was promoted to Umbu captain at such a young age. I'm not even worthy enough to make him fight seriously. Knowing that competing with swords will be pointless, Yujao sheathed her sword and made a hand seal. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. 3 shadow clones appeared next to her. Fujin saw them weaving hand signs and sighed, I should avoid sparring in the future. My natural instincts have completely been honed to kill. All 3 of them have provided me with so many openings that it has been a challenge to restrain myself. Anyways, I have seen enough. Time to end this. Yojo's clones completed their hand seals. Wind release, great breakthrough jutsu. Fire release, fireball jutsu. Fujin saw a giant fireball that was being deconstructed into flames and spreading along the wind, heading towards him. He immediately moved out of the range of the attack. However, the last clone and Yojo followed him. Wind release, air bullet jutsu. Water release, water bullet jutsu. Both shot a dozen bullets each at Fujin. However, Fujin rapidly moved towards them while dodging the bullets with ease and leaving multiple after-images behind. Yojo tried targeting Fujin's path but was unsuccessful. Fujin appeared behind her as chakra gathered on his palms. Yojo and her clone tried moving away while grabbing their swords. However, Fujin hit their abdomens with his palms. Yojo's shadow clone dispersed due to the damage. Yojo herself was sent flying and slammed into a tree. The damage caused her remaining clones to dispel as well. On the other side, Bunjiro realized that water shurikens won't help him resolve the situation. He weaved a few hand seals quickly. Water release, raging waves jutsu. Bunjiro supercharged the jutsu by pouring most of his chakra into it. He spewed a large amount of water that rushed towards Fujin's clone like a giant waterfall. Fumito was waiting for such a move. Lightning appeared on his palms and a beam was launched into the water that Bunjiro released, electrifying it. Fujin's clone noticed the combination attack and smiled, not bad. He bluffed when he said he wanted to use the mind-body switch jutsu. He was waiting for Bunjiro to try and drown me. Looks like I won't have to worry about them dying easily. Oh well, time to establish my prestige in this team. The electrified water wave appeared in front of him. Fujin's clone refined his chakra instantly and attacked. Wind release, infinite breakthrough jutsu. Fujin's clone exhaled very strong winds. It clashed with the combination jutsu and overpowered it instantly. The electrified water was sent flying towards where Yojo's clones had lit a fire. The winds created deep scars in the ground. Many trees were cut while a few were uprooted. Bunjiro created a water wall to protect himself. However, it kept crumbling at every second. He desperately put all his chakra into the wall to ensure that it protected it. He gritted his teeth and thought, Fujin is this strong? This is crazy. Luckily this attack isn't targeted at me. Otherwise, even if there were 100 of me, we would have died. Fumito escaped into the ground without any hesitation. He was horrified by the attack. He cursed, what the fuck? How the hell can a 14-year-old use such an insanely strong attack? That too with just half his chakra. Captain my ass. His level should be far beyond it. Chapter 298, Chapter 295, Doing Paperwork with Enthusiasm. Yojo got back on her feet and grabbed her sword. However, Fujin raised his palm and said, enough. That's sufficient combat for today. Yojo nodded and sheathed her sword again. Suddenly, she looked behind her. At that instant, a strong wind blew through the area. Numerous branches were broken. Yojo struggled to keep standing. A massive amount of water suddenly landed on the fire that was spreading, dousing it and covering the area with steam. After the winds passed, Yojo asked, what is that? Fujin replied, looks like my clone decided to end the battle. Let's go and check on them. Just like Fumito, Yojo also sensed the fight happening at the other place. But she was still surprised that Fujin could unleash such destruction with just a clone. Both flickered towards where Fumito and Bunjiro were. The winds had finally calmed down. Fujin and Yojeo saw Bunjiro sitting on the ground while breathing heavily. Despite wearing a mask, they could see that he was scared. Sensing them, Fumito climbed out of the ground. He looked at Fujin. This time, there was no disdain in his eyes. Instead, there was admiration and respect. Fujin looked at his clone, who dispelled himself in response and passed all the memories to Fujin. Fujin said, "I have seen enough for now. We will end the fight here." Neither Bunjiro nor Fumito objected. They didn't want to be on the receiving end of such a devastating jutsu again. Fujin looked at Bunjiro and said, "Take a good rest, your chakra levels are very low." Bunjiro nodded and replied, "I will." Fujin looked at Yojeo and Fumito and said, "Though the cuts on you are shallow, get them healed as well. We will meet back in our room after 3 days. I'm not sure when we will be assigned missions or which missions we will be assigned." He looked at Bunjiro and explained, "Generally speaking, easier missions are assigned when a new Umbu joins the unit. But, Yojeo and Fumito have a lot of experience. So we may be given tougher missions to start off. So be prepared." Bunjiro nodded again and said with confidence, "Don't worry, Captain. I'm prepared." Fujin nodded and said, "Good. Let's meet later." He flickered away, leaving his 3 subordinates together. Bunjiro said, "I never thought that the gap between an Umbu and an Umbu captain would be so strong." Fumito shook his head and said, "You are overthinking. He is just too strong. I don't think my old captain would stand a chance against him. I wonder how he trained to be so strong at just 14. And why isn't he famous? I never heard of him until today." Yojeo said, "I guess he did missions that were classified. So he never got any credit for them. Still, I didn't think that I'd be so outclassed in swordplay. I'll be returning to my training." Fumito nodded and said, "I will be doing the same. Bunjiro, after you heal and rest for some time, visit the training facilities. Instead of resting at home, meditate in the water training rooms. Considering how strong our captain is, our missions might be very difficult." Bunjiro replied, "All right. Thank you for the tip, Fumito-senpai." The 3 visited Konoha Hospital before going their own ways. Meanwhile, Fujin had created 60 shadow clones to continue learning the seals while he went into the wind training room to meditate. While meditating, he analyzed, "Hiruzen gave me quite a strong squad. Yojeo's swordplay is as good as I expected. But her skills with elemental jutsus were a surprise. As for Fumito, despite being a Yamanaka, his skills with lightning jutsus and his ability to form combination jutsus with allies is very impressive. And he didn't show any wind jutsu, which is supposed to be his main element. But I guess that is to be expected. After all, advancing to Jounin rank with just the Yamanaka's secret techniques is extremely rare. And it is even more difficult to become an Umbu captain. Bunjiro is the biggest surprise though. Though rank A and S jutsu seem cool, in a battle, the most effective jutsus are the ones that can be spammed or affect a huge area. With water shuriken and raging waves, he covers both these areas. Though he will have to improve his movement and reaction speed. But, that will improve as he goes on difficult missions. While Fujin was analyzing his team, one person had a very dark face. Sitting in his office, Hiruzen was watching Fujin with his crystal ball. He thought, "I gave you a team. Go hang out with them, train with them, and make friends. Why are you back in the training rooms?" All that effort only managed to keep him away for an hour. Hiruzen immediately began doing his paperwork while thinking, I need to find a suitable mission for his team. A mission that will keep him away from the village for at least 2 weeks. Takao, who was helping Hiruzen with the paperwork, looked at him in surprise. He wondered, why is Lord Hokage going through his paperwork with such enthusiasm? The next day, Hiruzen sat in his chair while looking at 3 files on his desk. All these 3 files had a mission that needed an elite Jounin level ninja to lead. Hiruzen looked at the first file and thought, this mission will be a long-term deployment in the Land of Water. It would have been an excellent mission to test how good Fujin is beyond fighting and killing. Unfortunately, I don't want to risk sending him on another long mission in a major village. I'm afraid he might drag Konoha into that civil war. I'll let Renjiro take care of this. He opened the second file and thought, Suna and Iwa are signing some sort of treaty or at least an understanding in the Land of Birds. Considering the current situation, an alliance between them could prove troublesome for us. However, Oniki should see the bigger picture and realize Kumo's threat. Fortunately, Oniki and Raza aren't meeting. Still, it will be best if this meeting goes bad. But Suna should be hunting for Fujin. It's not a good idea to send him there. I'll let Eagle lead 3 Umbu squads with former root ninjas here. Finally, Hiruzen opened the last file and thought, the leaders of the IDE family and Kagawa family from the Land of Grass are going to meet in IDE territory. Though very few in the Land of Grass support IWA, IDE is one of them. In fact, they are the most significant. They control a large territory along their borders with the Land of Earth. Shikaku believes that this meeting is a trap to kill the head of the Kagawa family who supports Konoha. I'll send Fujin's team here to ensure that the head of the Kagawa family returns safely. Since this meeting is supposed to last for over a week, they will be away from the village for at least 2 weeks. Hiruzen decided to assign the mission to the Land of Grass to Fujin's unit. While Hiruzen was picking out a mission, Yojao was training extremely hard along with Hayate. Sounds of swords clashing could be heard for hours in their training ground. Finally, Hayate said, "That's enough for today. You need to rest." Yojao stopped and sheathed her sword. Both went out to grab a meal. Hayate asked, "What's gotten into you today? I haven't even seen you train with such intensity." Yojao sighed and said, "I was assigned to a new team yesterday. The captain arranged a sparring session. He parried my hazy moon knight slash with ease. During the fight, I couldn't land a single hit on him." Hayate was surprised. Even though he was teaching Yojao, her strength wasn't far from his. He asked, "He sounds very powerful. Who is your new captain?" Yojao replied, "Suzuki Fujin." Hayate tried recalling, but he couldn't remember anything. He said, "I don't think I have ever heard of him. Is he a veteran ninja who keeps a low profile by hiding in the Umbu?" Yojao shook her head and replied, "No. He is just 14 years old. I looked up his information as well. But I didn't find much on him other than the fact that Senju Renjiro was his teacher and that he was the champion during his Chunin exams." Hayate was shocked. He asked, "A 14-year-old boy defeated you in swordplay? Which style did he use?" Yojao had a bitter smile as she said, "None. I couldn't make him use any." Hayate was left speechless. He thought, seeing the intensity of her training and her voice, she should have been defeated very thoroughly. He muttered, "A 14-year-old genius who is already an Umbu captain. Looks like our village will have another strong ninja in the future." Yojao nodded. To cheer her up, Hayate changed the subject and talked about the stuff she liked. Just as Hiruzen expected, Fujin's name would slowly be known among the generation that was around 6 to 8 years older than him. These were the batches that had graduated from academy right after the Third Great Ninja War and hence had very high numbers. Due to this, Fujin's reputation would slowly build up in the village. Chapter 299, A Boring Mission? On the day Fujin was supposed to meet with his team, an Umbu ninja showed up at Fujin's house and passed him a message. Fujin frowned as he thought, a mission on the very same day we decided to meet? That old fox must be spying with that perverted ball again. Fujin and his team met in their assigned room at the decided time. Fujin looked at his subordinates and asked, "Are any of you still injured?" Everyone shook their heads. Fujin said, "Good. Lord Hokage will assign our first mission today. Follow me." Fujin walked towards the Hokage's building. Yojeo, Fumito, and Bunjiro followed him while lost in their own thoughts. Bunjiro was excited. He thought, wow. I never expected that Lord Hokage would assign my first Umbu mission himself. I lucked out by joining Fujin's team. Though I hate Daisuke, I am so glad that he led us to meet Fujin. Fumito thought, a mission after such a long time. And this is assigned by Lord Hokage as well. I have to perform properly and show Lord Hokage how capable I am. Only then I will have any chance of becoming an Umbu captain. Yojeo's eyes were glued to Fujin's back. She was interested in finding out more about Fujin and his skill with the sword. The group soon entered Hiruzen's office. Hiruzen looked at Fujin's turtle mask and asked, "Why aren't you wearing the hawk mask?" Though Hiruzen had seen that Fujin used the turtle mask during sparring, he thought that Fujin would go back to the hawk mask during normal Umbu missions. Fujin replied, "That mask gets identified quite quickly. So it kinda loses its purpose." Hiruzen nodded, but he was surprised. Though it was a very logical move, most ninjas wouldn't do it unless the mission demanded a high degree of anonymity. After all, who wouldn't want to build their fame and be well known and respected throughout the ninja world? Hiruzen explained the mission details to Fujin's team. Fujin analyzed the details and thought, looks like this will be another long and boring mission. Sigh, I wanted to continue training. After understanding the details and importance of the mission, Team Fujin left the office. Fujin said, "This will be a 2 to 3 weeks long mission. Pack up the supplies and meet me at the village gate in 30 minutes. Everyone nodded and dispersed. 20 minutes later, Team Fujin left the village and moved towards the land of grass. A day later, they entered a town under disguise. The street was bustling with a high number of people who were going about their lives in a happy mood. Fumito looked around the town and said, "Looks like the Kagawa family is doing a great job. This town is very peaceful and prosperous and the citizens look happy and content." Yojeo nodded and said, "Yeah. Their family has a few jounins. So the city should be safe in times of peace." The group walked to a location from where they could watch the central mansion very clearly. Fujin's eyes glowed as he saw a bunch of people in the courtyard. They were all flocking around a man in his 50s. He muttered, "So he is Kagawa Noriyuki, the leader of the Kagawa family." Fujin instructed, "Lord Hokage should have sent him a message mentioning that we will be protecting him from the shadows. So we won't be coming in any direct contact with him unless trouble really happens. According to our information, he will leave the town after 3 days. Though unlikely, IWA could send an assassin to kill him while in the city. So we will take turns to keep an eye on him. I and Bunjiro will keep an eye during the day. You two will keep an eye during the night." Yojeo replied, "All right. We will investigate the city a bit before getting some rest." Fujin nodded. Fumito and Yojeo left. Their experience in the Umbu was longer than Fujin's. so he didn't need to give them many instructions. Fujin and Bunjiro hid themselves while keeping an eye on the mansion. Bunjiro was a bit nervous. Even though Fujin had guided him earlier, he had provided guidance to the entire group at the same time. He had never interacted with Fujin one-on-one. After some silence, Bunjiro couldn't hold it anymore and decided to talk. He asked, "Aren't we in peacetime? Why is IWA trying to create trouble right now? Wouldn't that cause a war?" Fujin looked at Bunjiro and wondered, what would he think if he knew what I did in the land of wind? Fujin shook his head and said, "The peace you see is only on the surface. In reality, this peacetime is a continuous war between the Umbu of various countries. Every action we take is to increase our advantage in the next war. The village that does this the best while building its military power will likely be the one to win the next war." Bunjiro was shocked by that answer. His understanding of the world shattered. He muttered, "Doesn't that mean that the next great war is a certainty and the peace is only temporary?" Fujin nodded, "Pretty much." Bunjiro's mood became a bit depressed. He asked, "Does that mean we will be fighting IWA ninjas for sure this time?" Fujin replied, "Not really. Fighting between Umbu can become very complicated. This might just be a false alarm. Or perhaps IWA faked information so that we would waste our time protecting him while they attack someone else. Only around 30% of the missions actually involve any combat. Life and death battle is even more rare. But, it is better to just assume that we will be in a life and death battle in every mission." Bunjiro nodded and the two became silent once again. After a while, Fujin asked, "How are the other four doing?" Bunjiro wasn't surprised by the question. He replied, "Tatsuya was in the same genin team as me. Though he failed last time, he is participating in the current genin exams and has qualified for the last round. He should be able to become a genin." Daisuke, Ryoma, and Bunko were put in the same genin squad under a genin sensei. But, we had an argument after the graduation exam. So I don't know much about what happened to them later. I heard that they participated in this genin exam but were eliminated in the first round. Fujin was surprised. He asked, "You five used to be so close to each other. Why did you suddenly argue?" Bunjiro let out a sigh and answered, "After you guided us for the last time, they just practiced the 3 basic ninjutsu and didn't train any further. But me and Tatsuya began learning the elemental jutsus and hence gained a better rank in the exam. So after the exam, they blamed us and said that we trained in secret instead of training at the same speed as them. They stopped speaking to us after it." Fujin shook his head in disappointment and replied, "I see. That's a bad attitude. But seeing how strong you have grown, I guess it was good for you." Bunjiro nodded. After the argument, he had become very careful in choosing his friends. He only befriended the ones who worked as hard as him and pushed him to be better. He looked at Fujin and secretly sighed in relief. He thought, Daisuke said that he was friends with Fujin from the time that they were very young. I was afraid that Fujin would get angry at me since I abandoned his friend. Luckily he is moral and just and doesn't blindly side with his friends. Bunjiro felt that his worries were just. After all, Daisuke was the one who brought their group to Fujin and he claimed that he had played with Fujin since they were 2 years old. However, Fujin had long forgotten that. After all, he wasn't sure whether he could even consider those memories as his. He had agreed to guide them just as an experiment. Since they didn't have anything to do, Fujin began talking with Bunjiro about his abilities. Sensing the chance to gain additional guidance, Bunjiro told him everything about himself. Fujin made a few comments on how he could improve further. After learning everything about him, Fujin thought, looks like Renjiro isn't the only one who trains his students very seriously. He lucked out by getting a Jounin sensei who was dedicated to raising the next generation. Fujin said, your progress is very good. Your control over water jutsus is good. But, you should focus on improving your speed. Work on your body flicker jutsu. Learn how to do it without making any hand seals and sustain it for longer distances. When you combine that speed with your sustained water shuriken offense, you will see far better results. Bunjiro immediately nodded. He recalled how Fujin had disappeared in front of their eyes and his clone had appeared behind them. If he could replicate the same, then his attacks would become much more deadly. Fujin asked, do you use a training seal? Bunjiro nodded and replied, yes, Sensei bought one for each of us a few days after we became his students. It exerts pressure and resistance up to 125 kilograms. I can currently handle up to 69% of the maximum pressure. Fujin replied, that's good. Focus on maxing it out. When you do, I'll make a new one that can exert pressure up to 500 kilograms. Bunjiro said, I will do it. Thanks, Captain. Chapter 300, Ambush. As the sun rose, casting its golden rays upon the town, a sense of anticipation filled the air. Many people gathered along the streets, their faces beaming with excitement and curiosity. Vibrant banners fluttered in the gentle breeze, displaying the emblem of the town and symbols of its proud heritage. The atmosphere was charged with a mixture of admiration and reverence. At the center of the commotion stood Kagawa Noriyuki, adorned in regal attire, radiating an aura of authority. Accompanying him were a retinue of influential nobles and skilled ninjas, each exuding a sense of confidence and purpose. Their presence commanded attention and respect. The townsfolk lined the streets, their eager eyes fixed upon the procession as it made its way through the heart of the town. Cheers and applause erupted from the crowd, echoing through the bustling thoroughfares. Among the crowd stood Fujin and his team who had disguised themselves. It had been over 3 days since they arrived in the town. Fujin observed the procession and thought, not bad. He converted this meeting into some sort of festival. This will increase his prestige and reputation. And all he had to do was put up a display while leaving the town instead of just leaving silently. Fujin was impressed by Noriyuki's intelligence and methods. Standing next to him, Yojao said, the ninjas wearing those fancy vests are the 8 Jounins protecting this town. Even the leader is supposed to be at Jounin level. Fumito commented, only 3 of them can barely be considered at the Jounin level. The rest, including the leader, are at the Chunin level. Fujin nodded and said, still, it's impressive considering that it is just a town in the land of grass. Not long ago, Fujin had raided the western cities in the land of wind. Of the 5 cities he attacked, 4 didn't have any Jounin protecting them. Yojao observed properly and said, the man standing next to Noriyuki is Hoshino Ryoichi. He is hiding his chakra but is quite strong. He is said to be among the 3 strongest ninjas in Kuzagakuer. In the 3rd Great Ninja War, he held back a division of Iwagakuer to save a city. Fujin nodded. He already knew about him. After recruiting Kasai Shigeki, Fujin began looking for information on talented ninjas outside the 5 major villages. Hoshino Ryoichi was among those ninjas. Fujin was wondering how he could recruit him. Unfortunately, Fujin didn't have any means of recruiting or controlling him. He was hoping to get some additional intel on Ryoichi during the mission. After passing through the main streets in the town, the entourage left the city and slowly disappeared in the distance. In the mansion, 5 people stood on the balcony and saw the entourage leaving with worry in their eyes. They were the family of Noriyuki. Considering the danger during this trip, Noriyuki hadn't taken any close family members with him. Instead, he had made all preparations to ensure that his son would succeed him if something happened to him. The ones who could pose a threat to his son were all made to accompany him to the meeting. Team Fujin followed the entourage from a distance. Bunjiro sighed and said, "They are moving slower than even the trade caravans." Fumito nodded and said, "It's because they have many civilian nobles. Those bunch are the slowest when it comes to moving long distances. But learn to be patient. As an umbu, you may have to spend weeks or even months doing nothing but keeping a watch." Bunjiro nodded. They followed Kagawa and his group for over a day until they reached the banks of a magnificent river. Across the river was Mizukoshi, the westernmost town in the land of grass and the town where the IDE family held power. The river, teeming with turbulent waters, surged with a forceful current. A normal civilian wouldn't be able to swim in the river. Fortunately, a sturdy bridge spanning the width of the river was built by the IDE family. The Kagawa family entourage crossed the bridge and was immediately welcomed by the people arranged by the IDE family to greet and welcome the Kagawa family. Observing them from a long distance, Yojeo said, "That bridge looks like the perfect ambushing spot. Other than ninjas, everyone would die immediately." Fujin nodded and said, "Well, our task is just to ensure that Kagawa Noriyuki stays alive. So if they are ambushed here, focus on killing the ambushers rather than defending." Yojeo and Fumito understood Fujin's intentions and nodded. However, Bunjiro was shocked. He looked at Fujin once again and thought, "But wouldn't that mean that every civilian will be dead? There are over 30 people in that group who can't use their chakra. Do we have to be so heartless?" Despite his doubts, Bunjiro didn't question Fujin. As an umbu, obeying the instructions of his superior without any question was the basic requirement. Otherwise, the success rate of umbu missions would drop drastically. If he had any questions, he could ask them after the mission was completed. Team Fujin infiltrated Mizukoshi and stayed there for the next week while keeping an eye on Kagawa Noriyuki. However, not a single incident happened during that week and no one tried to attack Noriyuki. Finally, after completing all meetings and discussions, the Kagawa family entourage left Mizukoshi. Bunjiro saw them leaving and muttered softly, "Looks like Shikaku-sama's analysis was wrong." However, the eyes of Fujin, Yojeo, and Fumito were glued to the water around the bridge. Yojeo muttered, "He is right once again." Fumito asked, "Should we make a move?" Fujin replied, "No. We don't know whether they are enemies or not. We would create trouble if they have any other purpose. But stay ready. We will make a move as soon as they do." Though they could see the chakras, they couldn't see to whom the ninjas belonged as they were hiding underwater. If they weren't IWA ninjas and instead were from the IDE family, then Fujin would have to reassess how to make a move. After all, it would then be an internal conflict rather than a hidden conflict between Konoha and IWA. Though Fujin had killed various forces from the minor villages, all had been done with utmost secrecy. If he openly killed them in front of an entire town, then it would be disadvantageous for Konoha diplomatically. The loss would far exceed the gains made by saving the Kagawa family. Even if he used disguises, it wouldn't take a genius to figure out who the external forces protecting the Kagawa family were. Bunjiro heard their conversation and was confused. He asked softly, "What do you mean?" Fujin replied, 16 ninjas are hiding in the river. Be ready to flicker." Bunjiro immediately became serious and mentally prepared himself for a fight. The group watched as the entourage began crossing the bridge. Despite walking on it, none of the Kagawa family ninjas detected the ones hiding underwater in the strong water current. Without leaking any chakra, everyone in the group underwater grabbed a kunao with an explosive tag attached and threw it at the entourage. At the same time, one ninja made the confrontation hand sign. Immediately, the explosive tags attached to the bridge began glowing. Since no incident had happened, most of the people in the entourage had become lax. However, Hoshino Ryoichi was on guard and noticed the kunaos. He threw a couple of shurikens to intercept them and shouted, "Watch out!" Immediately all ninjas became alert. However, it was too late. Other than the kunao Ryoichi deflected, the remaining explosive tags all went off at the same time. The people from Mizukoshi, who were watching the entourage leave, watched in horror as the bridge that connected them with the rest of the land of grass blew up. Many immediately began screaming in horror. A few ran away as chaos spread in the town. At the same time, a smile crept on the face of Ide Tomoki, the leader of the Ide family. However, he soon hid it and shouted, "We are under attack. Everyone prepare immediately. We will save our fellow countrymen." Ide Tomoki looked at the explosion with ecstasy in his eyes. He thought, "Great. I was getting worried by how rapidly the Kagawa family was spreading their influence in recent years. Even my interests were being compromised. But with them out of the way, we will no longer have any threat. And by showing how quickly I decided to help them, my prestige will increase uncontrollably." Team Fujin didn't move and just observed the smoke. Soon, 15 figures jumped out of the smoke and stood on top of the river. They were Kagawa Noriyuki, Hoshino Ryoichi, 8 jounins, and 5 chinins. Fear and horror could be seen on their faces. Apart from them, everyone was dead. Even Ryoichi had a grim expression. Bunjiro thought, 6 chinins died to such a lame attack. These guys aren't worthy of being called chinins. Immediately, the ninjas hidden in the water came out and assaulted them. Fujin saw their headbands and said, "Rogue ninjas. Kill them all." Since they weren't wearing the headband belonging to Kusagakure, Fujin could just kill them and claim that the Kagawa family had issued a mission to Konoha to ensure their protection. Since the attackers had disguised themselves as rogue ninjas, no one could question them.